Welcome, welcome. Patrick Vernon here. Welcome to Busy 505 Entrepreneurial Consulting. This is a quick video. I'll try to keep it under 10 minutes, but I'll have to talk fast. Just want to make sure you're in the right place. I'm excited to see you here. I'm excited to spend a semester with you, but I don't want you here if it's the wrong class for you. And sometimes because the word consulting is in the class, I think there's a little misinterpretation of what this class is about and what you will get out of it. Let's start a little bit with housekeeping and just a little bit about what we'll do with HighFlex. Turns out we're a small enough class, we can all fit in 3650. If you come, please bring your laptop and a headset. That way, if we do breakout sessions, we might want to do that on Zoom. We might do some in person. I just don't know yet. This is an experiment. We're all learning together. Or you can just Zoom into the class, totally your call. And in fact, I will say, since much of our work is going to be teamwork, we may conclude together that Zooming in is more often than not the best way to go. We don't have that many lectures. So we'll decide together when we do want to come to class or not. But part of the issue is there are not that many lectures. This is not a sit and learn kind of thing where you just come kick back. You're going to have to be actively engaged with your team toward a strategic project. So there's no textbook. I'm guessing that because of all the teamwork, we might like Zoom better than in person, but we could do some mix of both. We will decide together. The project you will engage in is a growth strategy for a startup. And it can be almost any startup. I'm going to give you some that have already been pre-approved that are willing to do a project with you, but you could pick another one if you like. And in the first couple of weeks of class, we're going to form teams around startups. You got to have 3 to 5 people on a team. If you're really excited about a startup, you might want to be a team captain and recruit a couple people to your project. If you're more go with the flow, then join a team. Just make sure by the third class period, which is actually less than 2 weeks, it's the next Tuesday, we will have finalized the teams. So that's something to keep in mind. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this video, so you can start thinking about a startup. These are going to be hard projects. The entire semester, we're going to be working on a growth strategy, not an easy thing to do. And entrepreneurs and consultants both do all of these things. These are strategic problem solvers, and they are drawing from everything they know about business, and you'll have to do the same. I am not a professor of all these different disciplines. You'll have to bring that with you and try to integrate it with your team's project. It's difficult, and entrepreneurs and consultants do all of these things, but they do it very differently. Entrepreneurs are in the weeds. They're building their company customer by customer, brick by brick. And at the business school, most of our classes in management consulting, both of these things tend to be at 50,000 feet, right? High level strategy, and a lot of it doesn't translate well into startups. So this different perspective mostly means that this class is a class about an entrepreneurial mindset. And I think that's very different than management consulting. This is not a good class to take if you're going into management consulting and you wanted one more consulting class. This is about whether or not you think someday you want to do a startup. And should you do that, or should you stick with your management gig, at B of A or J of J or Deloitte? This class will help you answer the question, do you want to join my startup, or maybe stick with your regular job? As we work toward a growth strategy for a startup, we're going to have 4 major buckets of outcomes. And the biggest one is upper right here, juggling like a startup team, or you might even say like a consulting team. There are a lot of different data inputs, a lot of decisions to be made. It's very complicated concepts your team is going to try to put together. That requires a lot of juggling, and you may be the pilot of this balloon, but as you can guess, the wind may not blow where you're hoping it will blow. And in startups, the ups and downs tend to be exaggerated. When the wind blows in the wrong direction, it can be quite depressing. Of course, if it blows in the right direction and you're actually a startup, you could be wildly financially, wealthy if the startup goes well. In this class, I would say a lot of students struggle that there aren't right answers. I don't come to your group meetings and say, here's what you need to do. It's a matter of your team finding a vision, and that can feel really rudderless. And some students struggle with that, especially when you make some mistakes, and you will make mistakes. Experiential education is about making mistakes and learning from them. That can really feel depressing when you're acting like a normal student, and for 16 years-ish, you've been trained that when you make a mistake, that's bad. But in startups and in innovation, making mistakes, it's a part of the process. It's part of the lean process. If you've taken another entrepreneurship class, you've probably heard of lean startup. And lean startup is about making hypotheses, testing them, and then iterating. Well, why would you ever iterate? You iterate because there's a problem, right? You don't iterate when things are going great. Lean is all about learning that the process includes what you might call failure. And that failure is a lesson, and actually isn't a failure. It means you know more, and now you have a new, better hunch. This failing fast and iterating is a big lesson. And it's a big lesson to students who have been taught like making mistakes is bad. Making mistakes is frustrating, can be frustrating. But if you're failing forward, if you're failing in a way where you're learning and you have potential success down the road, that is important. Whereas if you fail and you just freak out and can't do anything for 2 weeks, that is a problem. So we got to learn to get out of that cycle and get into a failing forward, failing fast. We got to move forward. Take Edison's lesson here, right? He says on the way to the light bulb, there were no failures on the way. It was a 2,000 step process. So our project is going to be like that. It's going to be a lot of steps, and some of them are going to feel like failures. And I can bet that some of us, if we were on Edison's team, we would have quit after 1,500 steps. A lot of those steps in Edison's process may have felt like failures. Sometimes when I come to your study rooms, for example, it might feel like a failure, but it's not. If I'm giving you critical feedback, it's not failing. It's a part of a process toward truth, right? It's not the most fun part, but that is an important part to know more about where you're headed so that you have a better grasp on reality in your startup and a better chance of success with growth. Another outcome we have here is letting the data speak, which I will call less BS. Sometimes when I say this, students resonate immediately and they understand exactly where I'm coming from. Others are like, what do you mean BS? I think at the business school, we have a tendency to float at 30,000 feet. And when you do, you can fill up your speech sometimes with buzzwords that sound good, but maybe don't have a lot of meaning behind them. Or you might go out and find data that you don't really believe in, though it makes a logical story. I think you're good analytical thinkers, good strategic thinkers, and we can tell stories. Sometimes we struggle to connect with those stories as if they were the truth. So here in 505, you're going to collect your own data. We're going to be doing market research. Here are some of the activities we will be performing. We'll coach you through this process. It will be a long process, right? It's an entire semester. So be prepared for a lot of data collection and iteration, right? These are testing of hunches. And you will then own the data that you collect, and hence will have less BS. Your team then will plug it into a storyline. And I kind of want you to think more like a journalism student than a B school student. If you think about a journalist, you come up with an idea, you go interview that idea as your hunch, you go interview a bunch of people, you iterate your hunch based on what they say, you interview more people, and ultimately in your story, you quote those people. You don't say what you think, you quote what other people are saying. Whereas at the business school, what we've been taught, and I was taught this way as well when I came through, here's a strategic problem you have, go to your study room, come up with some logical answers, do some Googling to support those, and you're done. Well, that's not what we're going to be doing. We're going to be like lean journalists. We're going to go through this testing of the process. You got hunches. We're going to talk to people about your hunches, both customers and experts, and we're going to iterate those hunches. You will believe what you're saying at the end. There'll be a lot less BS, and you'll mostly be quoting others or citing data that you have found and not saying what you think. Lastly, I want to talk about becoming a real team player versus this divide and conquer thing that we all do. And I get why we do it, and it is efficient in some ways, but it's not a high-functioning team. To be a high-functioning team, it's very labor-intensive, and it's one of the reasons this class takes a lot of time outside of class. It can be fun time, but it is a lot of work. You need to find a team vision and a voice, and you need to come together to trust each other enough to challenge each other so that startup teams have to challenge each other, or you're going to go to market with something stupid and the world's going to kick your butt. In this case, I'll come to your study room and kick your butt and say, why haven't you thought of this? And why haven't you thought of this? So your team needs to get to a level where you trust each other enough to poke holes in your reasoning and find a more holistic truth. This is much more like being on a startup team than being on a consulting team where you're consulting to the startup. So we will simulate you're actually being on the team in this class. Think about these outcomes as you decide if you want to stay in the class. If you do stay, I'd love to see you in the class. I'm super excited to see we've got a full class. We've got some people on the waiting list, but we do have a couple people on the wait list. So if you're on the fence or not sure, please look at the upcoming homework in Canvas. That might help you decide. And drop the class quickly if it doesn't look like a fit for you. And in particular, if you just wanted one more consulting class because you're going into management consulting, this is probably not a fit for you. Here's some of the feedback I get from former students, and they say this quite adamantly. It is very much a heavy workload. They tend to say it's not as bad as 554, Consulting Skills and Frameworks, but close. They say it's worth it because it's a real life project, so keep that in mind. It's something to talk about in interviews. For a lot of people, that's helpful. And by far, they tend to agree this is the most intense team experience at UNC. You will definitely understand what it's like to get a team to a higher functioning level. Do not take this class along with STAR or 554 just because of the workload, but also because the different perspectives can be pretty confusing. I'm going to leave you with this slide. Consider these things as you stay. If you do stay, I'm super excited to see you in class on Tuesday or see you on Zoom. Your choice. I will be in 3650. I will also be Zooming in. So we will, we'll try this high flex thing together and figure out where we're going to go with it. Again, if you do come to class, bring a headset so that we can use it for breakout rooms. It's still not super clear to me how breakout rooms can work in a classroom since we'll be physically distancing. Look forward to seeing you in class.